Hi, and welcome back to Sylvia and Aki by Winifred Conkling, Chapter 9. God does not hear if you do not speak. Mexican proverb. Sylvia, Westminster, California. Painted on the side of Henry Rivera's yellow truck was a basket overflowing with fruits and vegetables and the words Rivera's Produce, Santa Ana, California. "Hey, sweetheart," Mr. Rivera said when Sylvia entered the packing house where he and her father were talking. "How's the school year going?" Before she could answer, her father interrupted. "Don't get me started with the schools." But Sylvia knew that he had already begun. "Hoover isn't a healthy place for a serious student," her father continued. "They have outdated textbooks, overworked teachers, and a system that doesn't encourage Mexicans to go on to high school." How many times had Sylvia heard the speech, word for word? In her mind, she recited along with her father the closing words. "It's unfair, it's an insult that my children, all of our children, aren't allowed to go to their neighborhood school." Mr. Rivera looked thoughtful for a moment, then said, "I know a lawyer who specializes in integration cases. He's had a lot of success in Los Angeles." "What's integration?" Sylvia asked. "Integration means that you can go to the Westminster School, even if you're Mexican," he replied. "It means that there isn't a white school and a separate Mexican school. It means there's one school and everyone gets the same chance to succeed." "That's right," Mr. Rivera said. "David Marcus, the lawyer I'm talking about, he's won several integration cases. He's helped to integrate the public parks and pools in Los Angeles." "What about schools?" Sylvia's father asked. "I don't know," Mr. Rivera said, "but I do know that hiring any lawyer isn't cheap." Sylvia could tell from the look on her father's face that he had already decided to hire the lawyer. "It may be expensive," Sylvia's father said, "but the only thing more costly would be to do nothing." On March 2nd, 1945, it was official. Sylvia's father sued the school system. On that date, attorney David Marcus went to the courthouse and submitted the papers for the case, Gonzalo Mendez versus Westminster School District of Orange County. For months, Sylvia's father had left the day-to-day work on the farm to her mother while he and Mr. Marcus traveled around Orange County collecting evidence and lining up witnesses for the case. Sylvia's father often left the house before dawn and returned after dinner, sometimes putting in longer hours than he did when he worked in the fields. To make the lawsuit even stronger, Mr. Marcus filed the case on behalf of 5 parents: William Guzman, Frank Palomino, Thomas Estrada, Lorenzo Ramirez, and Sylvia's father, one parent from each of the 5 school districts in Orange County. This showed that the problem didn't exist only at Hoover School. There was discrimination against Mexicans throughout Orange County. School board had ignored Sylvia's father when he phoned the office and sent letters, but once he filed the lawsuit, Gonzalo Mendez had their attention. A few weeks after the suit was filed, the phone rang as Sylvia and her family were sitting down to dinner. Sylvia's father got up to answer it. "Good evening, Superintendent Harris," her father said, glancing over at the family and putting a finger to his lips to indicate that everyone just should stay quiet. "Superintendent Harris is calling our home?" "I see," her father said. After listening for a while, he said, "Just my children or all of the children?" The entire family waited motionless, straining to hear what was being said on the other end of the line. "Are you asking me to drop the lawsuit?" Sylvia could hear her mother's sharp intake of breath. Her father looked out the window and toward the field. "Yes, I understand," her father said finally, "but no thank you." He waited a moment while Superintendent Harris spoke. "There's really no need for my attorney to call," Sylvia's father said firmly. "I'm not interested." Then he hung up the phone. He looked at the family and smiled as if he had just won the grand prize in the lottery. "The school board decided to let you kids go to Westminster School after all," he said. Sylvia's mother put her hand over her mouth in shock. "We're changing schools now?" Gonzalo Jr. asked, confused. "No," his father said. "You're staying at Hoover School for the rest of the year." "Why?" Sylvia asked. "Isn't that what you wanted, for us to go to Westminster?" "No," her father said, tilting his head and raising his eyebrows. "The lawsuit was filed for the benefit of all. This isn't just about you 3 anymore. It started out that way, but now it's about all 5,000 Mexican students in Orange County. Every child deserves a chance," Sylvia's mother said. Sylvia was stunned. All this time, she had assumed that the lawsuit and all of the trouble was just about her and her brothers. Now, for the first time, she understood that something bigger was happening. Her father wasn't doing this just for his family. He was thinking about kids she would never even meet, who went to schools she would never see. Her father said, "Sylvia, there cannot be justice for one unless there is justice for all." He returned to his seat at the table, pulled up his chair, and reached for his fork, just as though nothing had changed. But to Sylvia, something had changed greatly. It would have been easy for her father to accept the superintendent's offer and move them to the better school. But he didn't do that. He wanted his children to have the same opportunities as the children at Westminster. But he also wanted the other kids in the barrio to have the same opportunities that she and her brothers had. He really had filed the lawsuit for the benefit of all. Sylvia had always known that her father was a good and fair man, but for the first time she realized that he was more than that. "I think what you're doing is," Sylvia searched for the right word, "brave." Her father nodded. "Thank you. Now let's finish dinner." As the school year ended, thoughts of Westminster School were never far from Sylvia's mind. Her father's case would be heard on July 5th. The evening before the 4th of July, Sylvia ran through the fields with her brothers playing tag. Just before it got dark, her mother came out with a tub of homemade vanilla ice cream and bowls of strawberries and whipped cream. When the sky darkened, her father gave the children sparklers that hissed and rained luminescent glitter down on their arms. Then he launched bottle rockets that shrieked through the summer air. "Take a seat," he announced. "It's time for the grand finale." Sylvia settled on a blanket next to her mother and gazed at the black sky, waiting. A moment later, her father lit a single fuse and stood back. A bright light streaked across the sky like a falling star before exploding high above them into thousands of tiny twinkles that gradually winked out of existence. Sylvia gasped and her brothers clapped wildly. "Do it again," Jerome shouted. "Nope," her father said. "That was one of a kind." The blanket felt soft against Sylvia's head as she leaned back. She thought about Aki. How does she celebrate a holiday that's all about freedom when she's inside an internment camp? What can the word freedom mean to someone trapped behind a barbed wire fence? Sylvia said goodnight and went back to her room. She opened the stationery set she had received for Christmas and began to write Aki a letter. She wrote about school and her cat and her father's lawsuit. She tried to make the letter friendly and newsy, but that wasn't really the point. This had been just about the most perfect summer night in Sylvia's entire life, and she didn't think it was fair that Aki had to miss it. Her letter might not bring any real comfort to the other girl, Sylvia realized, but she wanted Aki to know that someone was thinking about her. Chapter 10. Love and a cough cannot be hidden. Japanese proverb. Aki, post in Arizona. Aki left the game of jacks she was playing with her friends when she saw her mother returning from the post office with 3 envelopes. 3 letters, Aki cried. 3! They had never received that many letters in one day before. Aki's mother first opened the envelope that had been postmarked in Denver. "It's from Seiko. It looks like he has something in it," Aki said, hopping up and down. When Aki wrote to Seiko, she always ended with the plea, "Please send candy and gum," and Seiko often enclosed treats with his letters. "Just a minute," said her mother with a laugh. "Let me read the letter first." She opened the envelope and removed a sheet of paper. Aki was sure there was a treat inside the bulging envelope. Her mother shared the highlights. Seiko bought a truck, a 1938 pickup, light blue. He doesn't drive much because gas is so expensive. They've had a lot of rain. "Anything from me?" Aki demanded. "Hold on," Aki's mother said, turning over the last page. "Oh yes, your brother does have something for you." Aki's mother reached into the envelope and handed her daughter a pack of Wrigley's Spearmint chewing gum and a Hershey bar. "Thank you," Aki squealed with delight. She unwrapped a stick of gum, carefully folding the silver paper and slipping it back into the pack. In the camp, she'd learned to waste nothing. She chewed the gum several times, then took a deep breath, allowing the spearmint flavor to create a cool, tingly sensation in her mouth. Aki's mother placed Seiko's letter back in its envelope. Next, she opened the envelope stamped with "Prisoner of War." "This one's from your father." But Aki hadn't known right away. She always cringed when she read those words on Papa's letters. Why is he a prisoner of war? She asked herself time after time. He's not the enemy. Aki's mother carefully removed the letter. Once again, it had been cut into ribbons. Aki's father tried to write in English, but sometimes he included a Japanese word or phrase when he didn't know how to express a thought any other way. Military censors cut the Japanese sections right out of the paper, just in case they included military secrets. At times, her father's letter had so many holes in them that they reminded Aki of the paper snowflakes she'd once made in art class at Westminster School. Aki's father always wrote her name several times so that she could spot it even through a shredded letter. Even if nothing else in the letter made sense, her name did. He was thinking about her. Aki's mother held out the final envelope. "This one's addressed to you." "Me?" Aki asked, puzzled. But she immediately recognized the return address, her own home in Westminster, California. It must be from Sylvia. Aki tore the envelope open and pulled out the letter. 3 pages filled front and back. Sylvia's stationery was light pink with a cluster of roses in the corner of each sheet. On the first page, in large loopy script, was "Dear Aki, I promised I would write to you, so here I go." Sylvia wrote about her teacher, who was so mean that she made kids sit in the corner facing the wall if they got caught speaking Spanish at school. She wrote about her new kitten, Ginger, who'd earned her name both because she was the color of fresh ginger and because she moved as gracefully as Ginger Rogers, the movie star and dancer. And she wrote about her father, who was going to court so that Sylvia and her brothers would be able to go to Westminster School. "My dad really, really wants us to get a good education," Sylvia wrote. "Sometimes it's hard, but I'm really proud of him." On the last page, just after her signature, Sylvia had taped a short article from the newspaper, "Westminster Man Sues School System." The article even mentioned Sylvia and her brothers by name. "Wow," Aki thought, running her finger over Sylvia's name in the article. "Someone famous is living in our house, in my bedroom." Aki kept all of her letters in an old cigar box that a neighbor had given her. She saved everything that people sent her, every card, every envelope, every candy wrapper. Her mother had locked away the old photographs they'd brought with them, so these scraps were all she had to help her hold on to a normal life, and most of all, to her father. Sometimes before she fell asleep at night, Aki looked through the box and tried to remember her father's face. But more and more he seemed a ghost to her. She hadn't seen him in more than 2 years. Aki was so different from the little girl she'd been the morning he disappeared from her life. She now stood 4 inches taller, and her hair hung 8 inches longer than it had been. If we were to meet, would he even recognize me? Aki remembered her father's smile and the gap between his 2 front teeth. She thought about how hard he worked, always the first out in the fields before dawn and the last to come inside at night. She missed her father most on the camp's movie nights when families sat together. Aki always sat next to her mother, but when the lights dimmed in the auditorium, she scanned the men in the crowd, searching for one who might be her father, just in case he was there in the dark looking for her too. One Friday afternoon, she returned to the barracks after school, planning to tell her mother that she wanted to skip the movie. She just couldn't stand the thought of her father not being there yet another night. As she approached the door, Aki heard voices inside. She didn't expect her mother to be home from her job in the camp kitchen until later. Who was inside? Aki found a man speaking quietly with her mother. It took a moment for her to see that the man sitting in a chair a few feet away from her was her father. Pop? Her father stood as Aki rushed to him and he folded her in his arms. Aki clung to her father so tightly that her arms began to tremble. "I love you, Pop," she said when she found the words. "I love you too," he said. Aki had always known that her father loved her. He had shown her a million times in the ways that he took care of her. But that was the first time that Aki could remember him saying it in words. "Please don't leave me," she said. "Please don't ever leave me again." Aki felt her father's embrace tighten. In the safety of his arms, anything, even an end to the life in Poston, seemed possible. "The war is winding down," her mother said. "We will be going home soon." Home? It was almost too much to believe. Aki felt like she was on the brink of getting back what had been lost to her. Her father, her home, her family, her whole life.